Hi, welcome to A Gray Barn Rising. I'm here with Bootsy Beagle, of course, and I'm reading the poems of the Indian poet Mirabai. Mirabai was born, as best as scholars can tell, in 1498 Common Era. She was born into a royal family in Rajasthan, which is northwestern India, and she married a prince of a neighboring clan who died soon after, and she had a falling out with the in-laws, who actually tried to kill her on a couple of occasions. There are many legends about the attempt to take her life. But the important thing to consider with Mirabai is that she had a kind of spiritual awakening and moved from a life of materiality to a life in which she tried to interiorize her consciousness more and more through meditation and through devotion. She in fact belongs to the lineage of Bhakti poets, and Bhakti is an Indian term meaning devotion or devotional. Her chief deity of devotion was Lord Krishna. So I'm going to read some of her poems, most of which deal with praise of Krishna. And for those of you who don't know, Krishna is often in the tradition of Hinduism depicted as the color blue or very dark. Now that is because he was considered to have an expanded consciousness. Yogis will say that, for example, one's aura will or energy field will surround the body, and that Krishna's was very blue because blue is the color of expansiveness, of an all-pervading consciousness. Similar, expansiveness similar, say, to the sky or the ocean. So whether his skin was actually blue or not is really not the issue. But you'll hear her talk about him as dark, dark complexion. I'm going to begin by reading a few poems translated by Robert Bly from a little chapbook I got some years ago. The poems are actually untitled. Bly gives them titles, so I will go ahead and read the title. It's true I went to the market. My friend, I went to the market and bought the dark one. You claim by night, I claim by day. Actually, I was beating a drum all the time I was buying him. You say I gave too much. I say too little. Actually, I put him on a scale before I bought him. What I paid was my social body, my town body, my family body, and all my inherited jewels. Mirabai says, the dark one is my husband now. Be with me when I lie down. You promised me this in an earlier life. You'll hear other references in these poems to earlier lives or incarnations, and it's the belief in this religious tradition that one goes or passes through many incarnations in order to clarify, to purify one's consciousness. All I was doing was breathing. Something has reached out and taken in the beams of my eyes. There is a longing. It is for his body, for every hair of that dark body. All I was doing was being, and the dancing energy came by my house. His face looks curiously like the moon. I saw it from the side, smiling. My family says, don't ever see him again, and imply things in a low voice. But my eyes have their own life. They laugh at rules and know whose they are. I believe I can bear on my shoulders whatever you want to say of me. Mira says, without the energy that lifts mountains, how am I to live? Mirabai roamed the area, which was very unusual as a woman of that time, and her poems can at times be irreverent and bold, and again they questioned social norms, women's roles, they questioned issues of class, they questioned religious dogma, where what she was really talking about was a direct experience of the divinity, to interiorize one's consciousness so much that one becomes one with the divine beloved. She'll often refer to herself, because she's losing more and more touch with her ego, she often refers to herself in third person near the close of these poems, as you've heard. And also, rather than Mirabai, she'll often call herself Mira. Why Mira can't go back to her old house. And again, I think interestingly, house is a metaphor, a house, but also an old way of being, an old way of living. The colors of the dark one have penetrated Mira's body, all the other colors washed out. Making love with the dark one and eating little, those are my pearls and my carnelians. Meditation beads and the forehead streak, those are my scarves and my rings. That's enough feminine wiles for me. My teacher taught me this. Approve me or disapprove me. I praise the mountain energy, night and day. I take the path that ecstatic human beings have taken for centuries. I don't steal money. I don't hit anyone. What will you charge with? What will you charge me with? I have felt the swaying of the elephant's shoulders, and now you want me to climb on a jackass? Try to be serious. I just love the directness of the closing of that poem, as I mentioned, the irreverence. When one knows something so deeply through this interiorizing of consciousness, she speaks with great authority of that knowledge of the divine beloved for her. Where did you go? Where did you go, Holy One, after you left my body? Your flame jumped to the wick, and then you disappeared and left the lamp alone. You put the boat into the surf and then walked inland, leaving the boat in the ocean of parting. Mira says, tell me when you will come to meet me. That's a more tender poem of the sense of this relationship with the divine for her, ebbing and flowing, and the longing, the tremendous longing that comes for the yogi, for the meditator, when the divine is, when the meditator cannot contact the divine for even a time. The clouds. When I saw the dark clouds, I wept, O dark one. I wept at the dark clouds. Black clouds soared up and took some yellow along. Rain did fall, some rain fell long. There was water east of the house, west of the house, fields all green. The one I love lives past those fields. Rain has fallen on my body, on my hair, as I wait in the open door for him. The energy that holds up mountains is the energy Mirabai bows down to. He lives century after century, and the test I set for him, he has passed. She will often talk about the energy of mountains. Mountains, for her consciousness, appear as something so monumental. Many of the great yogis would actually go to the Himalayas to meditate. So they are the abode of quiet and the abode of the divine. But also they represent something majestic enormous and, again, expansive, as I mentioned before, in terms of Krishna's complexion being blue. Don't go, don't go. Don't go, don't go. I touch your souls, I'm sold to you. No one knows where to find the bhakti path. Show me where to go. I would like my own body to turn into a heap of incense and sandalwood, and you set a torch to it. When I've fallen down to gray ashes, smear me on your shoulders and chest. Mira says, you who lift mountains, I have some light. I want to mingle it with yours. So I actually read all of the poems in this little chapbook, Mirabai versions by Robert Bly. And I want to read a poem, perhaps two. Let me see how I feel as I open this book. Translated by Andrew Schelling. This is called For Love of the Dark One, Songs of Mirabai, from Shambhala Press. And I think that another wonderful book, has a long and gorgeous introduction. The book is worth getting simply for that. I think I will read this poem here. These, as I said, most of her poems are untitled, so Andrew Schelling chooses not to give them titles. Gone, mad sister, my lover's departed, but listen, that flute. Oh, whirling senses, a heart reckless and tangled and mad. What sort of flute works this uncanny priestcraft? Even Mira's Lord can't untangle this snare, the power of 7 musical notes. I wanted to read that poem because it's a poem of intense commingling of Mirabai's consciousness with the internal energies. She talks about the 7 musical notes, and the yogis will often talk about the chakras or energy centers in the body, which by most counts there are 7. 6, and then there's a higher chakra as well, which gives us a 7th. And they are said to emanate particular sounds or notes in the body when one's consciousness becomes more and more interiorized. So the closing of that poem, I think, is extraordinarily powerful. I'll give that to you again. What sort of flute works this uncanny priestcraft? Even Mira's Lord can't untangle this snare, the power of 7 musical notes. I think I'll give you one more from this little book. Dark One, where are we going? The groves and alleys of Vrindavan forest had folded around us. Abruptly, the enchanter embraced me, drank up my curds, shattered my earthenware pot. With a blaze of fragrance and darkness, he snatched my earthenware jug and broke it apart. Where are we going, Dark One? Why this confusion? You come and you go through Gokul, rejecting my gifts, yet you are the Lord who heaps birth upon birth. I wanted to share that poem with you in particular because she sees the body as an earthenware pot and the consciousness as an earthenware pot that is to ultimately is another vessel that receives the divine energy, but also an element of the ego that needs to be shattered. So she's looking at the consciousness of the ego, that ego that is fixated on a limited sense of self as something to be shattered or dissolved would be a different word for that, so that one may merge with something larger. So I read this evening from the poems of Mirabai, the great poet of India. I read from For the Love of the Dark One, Songs of Mirabai, translated by Andrew Schelling. And I read the entirety of Mirabai versions, the little chapbook, translated by Robert Bly. I hope that you seek her work out. I think it will also inspire you to move toward a deeper sense of who and what you are. Thank you so much for joining Bootsy and me for another episode of A Great Bar.